Welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville. Before I start, let me say one of the reasons I love wristwatches is that they're so damn complex. There's so much wrapped up in them. In this tiny little thing on your wrist, there's so much desire and envy and engineering and design and aesthetics and social positioning and culture and value and history and memories, all in this one little box. And that gives us so much to talk about when it comes to watches. Unfortunately, a lot of what I just said, we don't like talking about. We love talking about execution and manufacturing and the technical side. We kind of like talking about the design. We love talking about history. But a lot of the other stuff that I just mentioned, things like what does it mean in terms of our social positioning, we're very uncomfortable talking about, and we don't a lot. And so that's what I'm going to hit today. I'm going to hit that one exact topic, and that is, in technical speak, the role of the watch as a positional good. Now, before I go on, there's something I should really talk about, and that is the way the watch media, the watch YouTube zeitgeist seems to work. At the exact time I was thinking about this and thinking what to write, the two guys, Rick and Ricky at Scottish Watches, had Ariel Adams on, and he was talking about collecting and how we shouldn't be so influenced by others. And that was kind of as I'm sitting at my desk scripting out what I was going to say. And then this afternoon, as I was catching the train home from work, I was listening to the two guys on Two Broke Watch Snobs, I hope I said that right, who did a killer podcast on this exact issue of where we are with watches, being watch collectors, the boundaries with consumerism and the competition inherent in this. So catch both of those things. If you're into podcasts, Two Broke Watch Snobs and Scottish Watches, both fantastic, but their latest ones, killers, and they're in a similar topic. So go check them out. Okay, so as I said, what we're talking about today is the watch as a positional good. So a quick little bit of the dry detail. What is a positional good? A positional good is any good or service that people value because they're limited, and your access to and your ownership of that good or your access to that service says something about your high standing in society. So positional goods are often any kind of luxury good. So big house in the right suburb, big yacht, luxury handbags, and you guessed it, a luxury watch. Now, one of the issues with a positional good is it must be exclusive. Companies that market positional goods work very hard to make sure and to craft the image that their goods are not accessible to the mass market. And they control the supply of these goods quite carefully to make sure they stay in that position. So you don't want to have too many of these things available, because if they are available and anyone can buy them, then suddenly your owning one would say nothing about your position, and therefore it loses its value. And again, we're going to be looking at luxury watches like from Rolex and Patek absolutely fit this bill, both in terms of their role and also the way they're managed by their owners. Now, this is not really a conversation. I'm talking to a camera, but I can hear what you are thinking right now, because many of you will be thinking this so strongly, it's reaching out through space and it's getting to me anyway. And that is, you're shaking your fist and saying, that's not me. I love my Rolex because of its engineering and its history and its links to the past, blah, blah, blah. And I've really got two responses for that, which is, really? You spent $10,000 on your watch purely because of the engineering, despite knowing that 40% of that was going straight to some athlete's pocket in marketing? And the second thing is, and if that was the case, why do you care, and why did you just tell me you own a Rolex? The reality is, and actually before I go on, let's be absolutely clear. I'm not some yogi. This is another one of those moments where I'm not pretending to be some mystic sitting on top of a mountain, talking about how the other people, the little people, feel. I feel this intensely. I'm a normal person. I feel the social positioning that goes on with watches pretty much like anyone else. I think it's I think the social position and what watches say about you is real, it's ubiquitous, and I think it's important to know. And that's why if you look at any of my watch reviews, I've always spoken about what are the messages that the watch gives to other people about you. And actually, I've been thinking about my watch reviews more since thinking about this video, and I'm probably going to get even more explicit about the positional power of watches in my reviews. Now, here's an interesting problem. Let's just say you truly don't care about the social positioning of your watch. You truly did just buy your watch because you liked it. You did, as they say, not give two shits about what anyone else thinks of your watch. You just bought the thing that you wanted. Here's the problem. Doesn't matter what you think. Doesn't matter what you want. Other people are still going to see your watch as a positional good. So regardless of what you may have bought your watch for, despite the fact you didn't care, you didn't research, you don't know anything about what other people think of your watch, they're still going to know about it, they're still going to care, and they're still going to make judgment calls about you. Now, to make this a little bit more specific and a bit more kind of concrete that you can get your hands about, I'm about to talk about Rolex a fair bit. Now, I'm not talking about Rolex because I hate them or because they're necessarily the bad guy. I'm going to talk about Rolex for one simple reason. They are the biggest elephant in this particular room. And as a result, they have been researched to death by various sociologists and psychologists and economists on this topic. So if I go looking up or if I do any research on this sort of thing, I just always run into Rolex. It's also helpful that you will all know about Rolex, and because I'm going to be talking about Rolex a lot, I get to put it in the descriptions, and that's going to mean that I get a lot more clicks and views because that's just the way this system works. Win-win, yay! Okay, so we're going to talk about Rolex for a little bit. What I'm going to do is run through, in a sort of a rough order, 4 different views about the Rolex brand. Now, I didn't make these things up that I'm about to say about Rolex. I actually took them from a book which is called Taste, The Secret Meaning of Things. Yes, I'm the kind of dweeb that reads this sort of stuff. So it's a book that talks about taste and good taste and bad taste and how it's formed. But put that to one side. Now we're talking about Rolex. Now the first quote I'm going to drag up from the book is one from a chief executive from Rolex who said, "We are in the luxury business. We are selling taste, selling fashion, selling status." That's pretty straightforward. Probably not what some of you who have bought a Rolex would like to hear, that Rolex thinks they're selling to you. However, I'll roll into another quote, this time from an advertising executive, John Hegarty, and he said, "Rolex says, I've made it. I've achieved that, done it, got it sorted. It's also obvious you have money because they cost so much." There's probably a little bit more vernacular, a slightly harder take on what Rolex themselves have said their brand, their watches, mean and say about their wearers. Now I'm going to give a completely different view given by another advertising executive looking at the Rolex brand. And this one comes from an executive, Dave Trott, and he says, "I wouldn't be seen dead in one. What it says is that you have no originality and you need to wear an accepted badge to say you've made money." That's pretty harsh. Now, to round this off, we're going to end up with one more. This one from Italian film director Franco Zeffirelli, who says that when he talks about his Rolex, that he thinks Rolex is above fashion. It is standard. "In my own work, I never try to be fashionable. Never. And the same could be said for the watch I have chosen to wear." Now, I deliberately put the quotes in that order. The order doesn't matter to whether they're right or wrong. But putting them in that order, I think nicely bookends the argument or nicely bookends kind of this look at what does Rolex mean when we have, it starts with the person selling the product saying, "I'm selling fashion." But then the person buying the product says, "I'm not buying fashion. I'm buying it because it's not fashionable." That's a really interesting take, and it probably says something about the complexity of what a brand like Rolex brings to these discussions of social positioning. Now, personally, I think that it's important that we do recognize this, because I am certain that pretty much every normal person has these feelings about their watches. I mentioned before the Two Broke Watch Snob podcast. One of the things that was so brilliant about that podcast was how the two presenters spoke openly about their experiences of this exact issue, about when they were thinking about buying an Invicta or thinking about buying other watches, how almost stressful it was thinking about what other people would think of their purchases, and how, whilst it's easy to say we should collect our watches in a vacuum, how hard that is to do, and how Instagram and everything else has changed everything, and that we should not be influenced by people. And as Ariel Adams says, we shouldn't give two shits about what people think about our watches. Now, I think one of the single most dangerous words in the English language is the word should, because it sets you up to be misled. It sets you up to fail. It tricks you into thinking that you should act, that you could act in a way that doesn't reflect the way the world is. And this idea of the watch, ignoring the fact that the watch is a positional good, is a classic case where the should screws you. You're right, I agree. We shouldn't be subject to these kind of consumerist desires to compete and compare and wonder where we fit in the social ladder based on the watch that we wear. We should, but we can't. That's a nature of the human condition. We are social creatures, we compare ourselves all the time, and a watch is how we do it. Deal with it. Now, having said that we should deal with it, what does that mean? How do we deal with it? Now, for me, I think it says there's three ways of dealing with the fact that watches are positional goods, that they will say things about you to other people. The first is, if you are reviewing a watch, be honest about, to the potential buyer, what other people might see in that watch. If you have knowledge about the fact that particular watches can bring certain meanings, can say certain things about you to the community, I think you owe it to your audience to tell that to them in exactly the same way as you might tell them about a problem with the movement or a problem with a chapter ring alignment. In fact, that is probably more important for them to know. The second thing is, if you are buying a watch, you should try and find out, how is this watch regarded? Not because it will necessarily drive you to an answer one way or the other, but if you are a normal person, you will care. You will care about how a watch is considered by other people in exactly the same way as you will care about whether the chapter rings are aligned, whether the bezel makes a nice sound when it clicks around, or whether the watch fits on your wrist. How much you care is a very interesting question, and each of you will have a different answer to that. But I think what you should do is critically analyze that and poke at it. Figure out for yourself, how much do I care, and what's that going to say about this watch? I don't know what your answer is going to be. Everyone will have a different answer, and sometimes, like the two guys on the podcast, Two Broke Watch Snobs, that consideration will be hard. But you know what? That's a good thing, because if you're thinking about that sort of stuff, not only are you going to buy a watch that you like more, but you're actually going to perhaps learn something more about yourself. So again, win-win. The last reason why you should go through this process of thinking hard about, what do people think of this watch? What do I care about? How am I going to react to this? Do I still want to buy it, or is this not really something for me? I don't want this said about myself. A third reason for why that process is good is because when you see someone else wearing a watch, you now know it's not obvious why they're wearing it. you will now know that there's many reasons why someone might be wearing that watch, because exactly like you thought, when you were looking at a watch, you had multiple meanings coming from it. You should now recognize they could be too. They might not be trying to rub your nose in the new promotion they got by buying that watch you've always wanted. Maybe they just love that watch. And here's the thing, even if you're wrong, even if that person is in fact a dick and did want to rub your nose in it, by you being charitable about it, by you giving the benefit of the doubt, you won't feel as bad. So again, win-win. So I'm going to wrap this little rant up right now. And these are the key messages. Watches are positional goods. They will say things to other people about you, your status, your values, and your value. That you mightn't like it, but tough titties, that's part of the human condition. It's going to happen whether you think it should or it shouldn't. Watches speak with mixed messages. They say different things to different people at different times. Again, you have to deal with that. If you think the watch says something specific to you, you have to deal with the fact it might say something different to someone else. Okay, the thing is, I think we should deal with it, not just ignore it. We should think hard about what these messages might be, not necessarily be driven by them, but we should know that they're there and make an active choice about what watch we're going to buy, knowing how other people are going to read it. And finally, I think all of this is important because if you go through this process, you will end up with watches, even though it's harder, you'll end up with watches that you truly love and can enjoy more. And you'll actually be more charitable about other people and their choices. And, what's wrong with that? So anyway, that's my rant. I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches. Hope you enjoyed this. Please subscribe and you'll hear more of my rants, my homilies, my ideas, my thoughts, and occasionally a watch review. Thanks very much. Bye.